All right, well, hey, this is online. This is Evan from Evan's Easy Japanese, and we're doing online live lessons. That's the introduction I'm supposed to say. If you want to help me out, you can donate on Patreon. You can join in for $5 a month. I'm getting the thumbs up from somebody. We're with Kayla and John, the only two paying customers so far. $5 a month, 3 lessons a week, short lessons like you've been seeing. All lessons end up online. If you don't want to pay because you're a stingy boy or a girl, I'm not being sexist here, but you want to help out anyway, comment, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, especially sharing, because that's sharing is caring, as Kayla likes to remind me. And other stuff you can do to help out or not help out is call me a stinky boy in the comments. All of the vocab we have on Quizlet, there's a bunch of links below. You can buy shirts, crazy stuff like that. I'm slowly designing more and more. I think I'm going to do some American like shirts from like the States and have like designs in Katakana and stuff like that. But that's not that exciting. We don't need to talk about that right now. We are on online live lessons number like 30. It's going to be like 35 or something because I'm falling behind on uploading them. But this is the 5th lesson. We are doing negative copula, i.e. negative des, which is kind of tricky. And we're also dealing with not adjectives. That being said, we're going to talk about grammar. Which is exciting. We're going to be talking about watashi and boku and a few other things like that. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant today. So you guys can all have fun. And this is probably going to get me canceled from the internet because that's a thing that people say. Oh, I'll get canceled. And then I'm like, oh, I don't actually care about that. Just like John. If I were embarrassed, you have to care to be embarrassed, right? All right. You guys ready to go?
Can't see your screen.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Hey, good call. That would have set us back, and then you wouldn't have time for all the stuff you got to do.
That's right.
Yeah, great. All right. You guys ready to go now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Kayla, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. We've already talked about Watashi and Boku a little bit, and then I tell you my story about that movie, and I'll laugh about how I'm repetitive. So I won't bother saying that story. The movie's name is Your Name. It's pretty good. Kimi no Na wa. That being said, this is about Watashi and Boku. We're discovering that there is more than one way to say the exact same thing, especially in Japanese. In English, that's true too in some cases. Both watashi and boku refer to one's self. The speaker, the person talking, is watashi and boku at the same time. The difference lies with A, politeness. Watashi is a little bit more polite. So if you're trying to do like a speech or something like that, maybe err on the watashi side. Formality, again, if you're being formal, watashi might be a little bit safer. And also, this is the critical one. This is the critical one. The gender/sex of the speaker. I added gender in there because that's the new buzzword all the kids are talking about. But yeah, I think gender might actually be the right thing because we're going to be talking a little bit about this word that I've highlighted right now. So if you're under the age of 5, then you should probably giggle. All right. So in Japanese culture, this sex and gender, this is important, okay? As much as we want to call it taboo and everyone's equal and all that sort of stuff. No, sorry, it just doesn't work out that way. But Evan, you do know that like gender is like a social contract, a social construct or whatever, right? Are you transphobic? You racist? I am already expecting those comments in the comment section. So my reply is shut up. Japan is a very conservative country. A lot of people don't want to admit this. It's very conservative. And the line between feminine and masculine is very clear. It's in the language. I want to emphasize this. It's in the language. Isn't that amazing, John and Kayla?
Yeah.
I haven't heard from you guys in a while. I wanted to get a little comment on there. You're not going to change their culture, so don't go over there trying to do so. This is one thing that I saw repeatedly when I was in Japan. The gaijin, the foreigner, would go to Japan and like talk about how their culture sucked, and then they would say you should do this, and then everyone was like, okay, thanks for telling me that everything sucks, and then they would just stop talking to you and you would lose all your friends. People would regularly cross the street as I was walking down the street to avoid being on the same side of the street as me. A gaijin. Gaijin means foreigner. So it's funny because even if the Japanese person lives in America and like they're clearly the minority of America, they'll still call white people gaijins. It's pretty funny, even though it literally means person from the outside. It gets translated as foreigner, but really it means non-Japanese. So yeah, Japan is very much a conservative culture. I would walk down the streets, and people would switch the side of the streets they were on to avoid being near me. Whenever I would bring it up with Japanese people, they would say that it was because they didn't want to accidentally have to speak Japanese or speak English to me because it would be very embarrassing. And I was like, you don't have to lie to me. I'm a 6 foot tall, bald white guy. I must be terrifying. Japan's something like 97% Japanese and then like 1% white, 1% black, or it's even less black. I think so. The majority of the non-Japanese are other Asians. There's a lot of Indians. Filipinos actually very common over there. So if we're all upset about that, sorry, it's reality. When I went out to eat with my Filipino Canadian friend, I won't say his name here. I'll tell you his first name. His first name was Dale. He was Canadian, but he was of Filipino descent. He spoke no Japanese, and after even living in Japan for like 10 years, I don't think he can read Hiragana or Katakana. When we would go out to eat, there's a great restaurant over there called Katsuhanate. We would go out to eat, and every week we just gorge ourselves on tonkatsu and all the refillable rice and salad and soup. The waitresses would always look at him and talk. And then I would have to respond because he had no idea what the hell was going on. Then they'd look at me, they'd understand me, but they would look at me with a weird expression and then immediately turn back to him and ask him a question. And then it would happen over and over again. I'd respond, and then they'd look at him, they'd ask him the question, I'd respond. They'd ask him the next question, I'd respond. It was hilarious because he would always like look at me like this, I don't know what's going on thing. All of this is to say that it's a very conservative country and you're not going to change it. So if the fact that watashi and boku are masculine and feminine and that's a problem for you, it's best right now to quit the language, okay? So if anybody here is having that issue, just quit right now. This is just the way the language is built. I was told point blank by a Japanese friend that I should watch out because there were many foreigners living in Gunma, the place that I made a shirt of, where I was moving, and that they might steal from me. So you have to understand, Japan is a very different country than America. Things are the way they are, and you're just going to have to accept it for now. With all that out of the way, if you're still even reading this, which you have to because I'm the one reading it, my college teacher told me to just use watashi because it's more formal and a bit more polite. This became a problem when I was in Japan because I sounded kind of gay or fruity, and all the kids in Japan made fun of me. They told me to at least use the word boku. Even the little girls who were at the school were using boku. It was kind of funny, and they were like laughing about me behind my back. The kids didn't have any hesitation to tell me that I was being, or yeah, what I just said. Yeah, they were all making fun of me behind my back. I sounded like a little bit on the girly side. We'll put it that way. I never got out of the habit. I started to more recently, but when I was in Japan, I just stuck with watashi because it's what my teacher told me, and I figured I should just go with what she had to say. But I probably should have been using at least boku. That was a long-winded way of saying there's some things about the language that you might not like, and you just have to deal with it, okay? Any questions on that?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Mm-mm.
I figured John didn't have anything to say. Oh, yeah. Hell, the kids in Japan didn't have any hesitation trying to stick their fingers up my butt. Go look up the word kancho. It's hilarious. It literally means enema. It's a game in Japan. Like, everybody who teaches in Japan knows what kancho is. And it's disturbing that that's a thing. But it's a thing. It's a thing. They run up behind you and stick their fingers up your butt.
That sounds really gross.
I'm going to try that on the TSA people.
I was thinking next time I get on an airplane, I'm going to have them manually pat me down, and I'm going to strap a cucumber to the inside of my thigh and see what happens.
Why?
Because they have to pat you down, and I don't know. It'll be funny. I don't know.
I don't get it.
In lesson 4, we learned that the word des. Okay, now we're talking about des and the negative of des. This is going to go on for a little bit. This is the tricky part of today's this lesson. Okay, And I very wishy-washily told you that it was the copula, or at least the very least, it was a distal polite marker. Do you remember me talking about that, or is that something we don't remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, great. In lesson 4, des looked very much like it was nothing more than the distal polite marker. Every sentence ended in a noun, and we just added des, okay? That's what was happening in the last lesson. If you go back and look at it, it was sentence, noun, des, noun, des, noun, des, okay? Now we're going to see why it looks like a copula. We're going to agglutinate it, okay? The word des is kind of like the verbs that we were learning in the previous lesson. We're going to change it. We're going to make it negative now, okay? But before we do this, we have to talk about the origins of des. It's actually a little bit murky where the word des came from, but the best evidence points to it being the particle de, which we haven't learned, followed by the verb arimas. So if you say de, followed by mas, it ends like that. So it'd be des. And the way that it agglutinates, the way that des agglutinates, the way that it changes when we make it negative or past tense, it follows the patterns of de plus arimas, okay? I've heard arguments that it was de plus suru, but just go with de arimas, okay? That the best match for educational purposes is de arimas, so I'm just going to go with that, okay? Everybody's like, nobody cares, but it comes up when I'm trying to teach people, or like when I'm trying to talk with other language teachers. When I try to talk with other language teachers, they all get uppity about this stuff. All right, so
I always heard it with the ensuru too.
What's that?
I always heard that it was like the suru at the end too.
Oh, did you hear it was like de suru?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a good argument because it's like desu. But when you go to agglutinate it, we get some problems with that. So that's what we're going to talk about here. A little bit. You're going to see it much later in our lessons. But for right now, because of the way that it operates. Oh, and John can't read this. I should probably put des over this because he's probably like, I don't know how to read this. And then really he's like, just get it over with. Kill me now. Look how slow my computer is. I hit the thing and it's not even, oh my goodness. How do you have a not responding on a Word document? For God's sake. All right, that's des. I'll add all the things over it later. We should probably get Arimas up here just so that we can follow along. Arimas. So at the very least, you have des and Arimas with the Hiragana over them. All right, and it's not even really Hiragana. It's it's Romaji over them. Okay, so if des were de arimas shortened, so if it were de arimas shortened, then we would expect the negative to be de arimasen. Does that make sense? Because masen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And however, you're not going to believe it, but it is actually de arimasen. That actually is the negative of des. So if you take des and you expect it to be de arimasen, the negative of des could be de arimasen. Or at least, the meaning de arimasen translates to the opposite of des. However, the only difference is that we usually add a wa particle after the de. You might remember this in lesson 3, drill 4. We talked about how negative verbs frequently use a wa particle. If you don't remember that, just go back to the video. I'm sure it's 10 videos ago or so. The wa isn't necessary, but it's very usually there. I like that phrase, very usually there. All right, so des's negative is dewa arimasen, and we have the romaji below, dewa arimasen. That's generally the negative of des, okay? Easy enough, right? Well, too bad it's not. Try saying dewa really, really fast, and you'll probably start saying dwa. Dewa, 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 dwa, 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 dwa. And then if you and that your tongue is pointing forward towards your lips, up against your front teeth, dwa, 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 dwa. And that your lips are also pursed forward in a weird fish shape, dwa, 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 dwa. That's actually, if you start saying it really quickly, that's going to happen to your mouth. It's just the way that it goes. Japanese people decided that to just slur the D and the wa sounds together, and you end up saying ja, dwa, 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 dwa. You get that sound if you do it fast enough. Dewa will regularly slur to ja. Okay? So we have another negative for des. Des will also turn into ja arimasen. I'm going to wonder if Kayla has ever seen ja arimasen.
I have.
Have you seen dewa arimasen?
I have.
Okay.
But I never knew. I probably was taught it, but I really never really understood why it was ja.
Right, yeah.
I've seen them.
You've seen them for real, or are you just joshing me?
No, I saw them. We went over vocabulary like 2 lessons ago.
Great, awesome, perfect.
I was just like doing it really fast though to follow along.
Right.
And you were right about like the whole fish tongue thing.
Yeah, it sounds dumb, but that's what happens. And that's an important point about language. I'm going to take a quick second to talk about that. If you ever want to understand languages properly, you need to focus on speaking because languages change via speaking, not writing. And when you start thinking about speaking, you get to start thinking about where your mouth is and all that sort of weird stuff. So yeah. Okay. So des turns into ja arimasen. It's also dewa arimasen. Right here I have there's a space between de and wa. That's simply because they're different particles. That frequently you're going to see them combined because they're right next to each other. All right, anyway, but that's not all, Skip. Is that from Dodgeball? Or am I screwing something up?
It's not from Dodgeball.
It's not from Dodgeball. That's not all, Skip. All right, whatever. Japanese verbs have a plain form. Remember how we're talking about the distal polite form? Sorry, I have trouble slurring. The distal polite form is something we do to the plain form. So a verb has a quote unquote a plain form. The actual verb is the plain form, and we're making it polite by adding the mas. Okay, so Japanese verbs have a plain form, which we haven't learned yet. And this occurs when you don't, like I just said, we don't agglutinate for the distal polite. Arimasen's plain form is nai. Okay, so arimasen has a plain form, and it turns into nai. Okay, this is a weird one. Just trust me, it's a weird one. Usually there's a better pattern between the mas form and the negative and the plain form. There's usually a stronger connection, but for arimasen, it's just a weird one. So arimasen turns into nai. Okay, like Bill Nye the Science Guy. You don't need to know this now, but all negative plain form verbs are secretly adjectives. We'll get into that next lesson. And as we see in this lesson, we make sentences that end in adjectives polite distal by adding des. Okay, so let's say that one more time. I'll say that like I'm not just reading it. In this lesson, we are making sentences that end in adjectives, and we're going to make those sentences distal polite. That's what I'm trying to say. We are making sentences that end in adjectives. We're turning them into polite distal. I should rewrite. We are, so in this lesson, we are turning, that's a bit more clear, turning sentences that end in adjectives. See, this is difficult because all these linguistics terms are smacking right next to each other. In this lesson, let's just say sentences that end in e adjectives are becoming polite distal by adding des. That might be a little bit more understandable. So in this lesson, we have sentences and they're ending in adjectives, and then we're going to make them polite distal by adding des. Okay, so like I just said, nai is it's an adjective. You don't need to know this now, but this is going to be somewhat relevant. So nai and then des. Okay, so we have two new forms of negative des. Des is also going to be janai des, right? The dewa turns into ja. The arimasen turns into nai, and then we still want to be polite, so we're going to go with des. Janai des. You probably, Kayla's probably experienced this in her college lesson. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a little. I mean, I remember kind of going through it, but I don't remember.
Okay. But then remember, ja is just shorthand for dewa. So we also have dewanitis. Like we have all of these. We have des turns into dewa arimasen, ja arimasen, janaides, and then we also have dewanitis, right? It's like a I don't know, some sort of matrix where we all Keanu Reeves. Yes, you're seeing that correctly. We use des. So yeah, this is the interesting thing. In order to make des negative, we use des. We use des to make des negative. It doesn't make any sense. unless we also think of des as being a politeness marker, right? This will make more sense when we do e-adjectives, which is the next lesson, okay? All right, Japanese is truly a weird language. It's one of the interesting things that happens when you have agglutination. Okay, the chief differences between all of these are the ja are more likely to be spoken. It's a slurring after all, so people like to slur their, what do you want to do? What do you wanna do today? Right, all of that sort of spoken language gets slurred. So are the nai-des ones. So when we end in nai-des and we have the jaws, those are more likely to be spoken. Dewa is more formal, more polite, more likely to be written, and that it's more polite because you're actually enunciating the words properly. When you go to the store and you want to be, if you go to a high-priced, hotel, they shouldn't be talking like, hey, buddy, what you want to do today? They should be saying, hello, good sir. How are you on this morning? They speak all proper. They enunciate everything. So dewa is more polite and formal. Okay? All right, TLDR. This is for all the people who don't want all the gibberish that I just talked about. Dewa arimasen, ja arimasen, dewa nai desu, and ja nai desu. These are all negatives of des. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That one was so long and it's so important, along with the don't try to change Japan because it's just not going to happen. Those are long ones. I hope they were kind of fun, especially the kancho thing. Right up the bum. Since that's such a lot of me talking, your brain. Oh, actually, let's do 4 real quick. Okay, I was gonna say let's stop it, but let's just do 4 real quick. Okay. Evan, does that mean that I can use de arimasu as a substitute for des? Can you use de arimasu for des? That question is going to naturally come up. The answer is yes and no. A few things. It's very important to remember that des is most likely de arimasu. De arimasu is rather uncommon. And in some situations that we haven't learned yet, it would be ungrammatical. We'll talk about this when it becomes more important. The answer is that indeed de arimasu can be used instead of des. It's just that it's a little bit uncommon. There's a small chance it's not grammatical. Okay, so I just want to point that out because if the negative of des is dewa arimasen, then the positive would be de arimasu. So can we use de arimasu? And the answer is yeah, but let's not do it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
We got one last thing to do. We'll do that last time, and we'll do this next time, and then we'll go into some lessons and actually do some drills. Okay?
Okay.
Yay.
Okay, John's excited. He gets to get the heck out of here. You guys have a great day. Peace out. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you like, subscribe, and share this video to everybody you know and yell at them repeatedly until they subscribe as well. If you'd like to support me even more, head on over to patreon.com where for just $1 a month, 3 cents a day, that's it, it's darn near free, you can help me financially keep these videos coming. And as a reward for your Patreon donations, you get access to all of the miscellaneous things that I produce to help out my own students who I teach in person, and also just things that I make for myself. And if you want a little bit more bang for your buck, head on over to Teespring, where you can get lots of fun clothing, mugs, stickers, cell phone cases, all that I've designed. More designs to come. I hope you have yourself a happy dappy day. Peace out.